Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Learning to spell is a developmental process, and young children go through several stages before acquiring the spelling skills. In English, we can see we have 21 consonants, but we have 27 consonant sounds. We have 5 vowels and 17 vowel sounds. In all, the child has to learn 44 phonemes, which is a lot of sounds and lot of letters for the child whose mother tongue is not English to learn. And that is where the difficulties rise, because a child who we call as English as a second language difficulty child will have a lot of issues in learning and mapping the phoneme and the grapheme. What do we mean by phoneme? The smallest unit of sound in a word is a phoneme, and grapheme is the visual symbol of the letters that we are mapping the sounds with. What does spelling involve? Spelling involves 3 steps. One is analysis, the other is segmentation, and the third is synthesis. Now, let us go each step one by one. Analysis. Analysis is finding out what are the sounds that are there in a word. For an example, I am taking the simplest word that every child can know, cat. This is an auditory exercise, and let us analyze and see what are the sounds that we have in this word cat. Can you tell me if you can hear the 3 sounds that I am saying to you? K, A, T. There are 3 sounds in the word cat, and the 3 sounds are K, A, T. Analysis done. Now we come to segmentation. We have done it orally by saying K, A, T, but now let us write it and segment it. K, A, T. So, cat has 3 sounds, and the sounds are K, A, and T. Having done the segmentation, the final step is the synthesis. That is, getting the 3 sounds together to say cat. It would be nice if we could also draw a picture of cat to make the child understand that we are talking about the cat and the child can relate to the meaning. Spelling has to be taught in this way initially, so that the child does this process of what it involves automatically when he hears a word. But initial stages, yes, step by step, structured teaching for the dyslexic child. Children with SLD, we teach them using the multisensory approach. By multisensory, we are talking about visual, auditory, kinesthetic and tactile, or in short VACT. The auditory mode and the visual mode are the most prominent modes that are used for any kind of learning, be it in school or outside. The auditory mode pertains to the hearing and how the child receives the inputs. It is important that the child receives the input in a clear, simple pronunciation, and the child is able to understand what is being said. I am talking in the context of spelling. Supposing we say the word something in a very fancy dialogue like something, the child is going to hear it only as something and will probably write it as SOMEFING, something. So, clarity in hearing is important in auditory mode. Multisensory way of teaching includes a lot of games to be played, and children learn best when being taught by games. Let's look at the various auditory areas or the pre-skilled areas in the auditory mode which we can teach the child with using many games for each. The first in our list is our auditory reception. What do we mean? Auditory reception is the ability to receive sounds and inputs that have been given to the child verbally or orally. He needs to hear what we are saying. Children with this difficulty will have trouble understanding rhymes, stories, directions, or even having comprehension of the listening paragraphs or academic texts that has been given orally. Some of the games that we can play to enhance the listening skills of the child. Let's take the first one, which is giving verbal directions or taped directions to the child. Put your name on the top right hand corner. Put today's date in the left bottom corner. Mark an X in the middle and write the title of this segment underneath the X. Now, we have given a lot of instructions, lot of steps. Can the child hear? We have seen that our children, SLD children, have difficulty in following multiple instructions. So, we need to train them. Another game that we can play is your Simon Says game. Here, the instructor will say, Simon says sit, and the child has to sit. The instructor will next say, Simon says stand. The child has to stand. The game becomes more fun when we have same instructions being given multiple times and the child not realizing because he is anticipating the next instruction. So, what has he not done? He is not paid attention and he is being impulsive and he does not wait to listen to the instructions. So, one is required to train the child. Another game that we have often played in class can be a little noisy, but still a lot of fun, is clapping. The instructor claps her hand, his or her hand, in a certain pattern. The child repeats that pattern. Start off simply and progressively make it more complicated. You will find that the children are not able to follow your pattern as it becomes more complicated. This auditory reception requires a lot of concentration and focus and attention on the part of the child to listen, to receive what has been presented orally. Our next point is auditory discrimination. Auditory discrimination is the ability to hear and the difference in similar sounding letters. For example, the letters T and the letters D. Both sound pretty similar, but both are very different. Children who have difficulty in this area will find it difficult to find the end spelling of a word, or if he has confusion, maybe even the initial sounds. For examples, the word send and the word sent, two different words. I send my sister home is D, S-E-N-D, but I sent her a present is T, S-E-N-T. The child must be able to hear the difference and must be able to discriminate the two different letters between D and T in order to be able to spell well. So, what are the games we can play for this? Simple classroom games or a group game where you tell the child, give him that instructions that whenever you hear a word beginning with the sound of B, then the child raises his hands and you dictate to him several words. He does not have to write it, this is all auditory exercises. So, you expect the child to lift their hands when you say words beginning with the P sound. For example, in the word pan, dan, ban, put, dub, bed, you would find the child should have risen his hands for the word ban and for the word bed. But in case he is finding it difficult to discriminate, he will find that he would have also put his hand up for pan and put or even dan. Our next one is auditory motor association. Auditory motor association is the ability to relate concepts which have been presented auditorily either by and express them by the gross motor, which is your physical bigger larger muscles, or by your fine motor, which is your writing. Now, number of games are there where you can play, teach this child. The games that can be played is the same Simon Says game, where you are telling the child to sit and stand and lift your hands. That could be one very nice game that the child can play, because he is representing what he has heard by moving either his whole body or the dictations that you give. That is also an auditory motor association thing. So, instead of making it a test, give these dictations as fun activities. Another game that you can play is to tap and ask the child to write number of taps that you have done. Another interesting games is that the child has to tap his feet when he hears of things that have been mentioned in his house. That is very interesting because it tests not just his auditory motor association, but also his vocabulary. Auditory vocal association, the ability to relate the concepts that have been presented auditorily through expressing it by his vocal association. Now, children whose auditory reception is not good and who have difficulty with auditory discrimination will find it difficult to reproduce what you have said orally verbally. Some of the games that we can play is the typical listening to a rhyme and repeating it. Children can do this very well. We often find that children have heard a music, a song, and they are able to repeat the song within few minutes. Sing along is a good auditory vocal association games. Verbal games, Chinese whispers, we have often seen that the first word the child has heard, by the time it comes down to the last child, that first word has completely changed. So, this is a good game. We can also play a lot of verbal games using your opposites and your synonyms. Good activities, good games, at the same time learning of vocabulary. Auditory visual association, the ability to relate what he has heard auditorily to something that he has been presented visually. Word maze is a lovely game which a child can play. Bingo is another game that the child can play. Another one way of finding if the child is able to visually isolate the word that you have presented to him orally is to present to him a maze or a group of words, similar sounding words in clouds as what you are now seeing. Now, when you say the word 10, the child must focus and zero in on this word 10. Can he do it? Can he identify amongst all the other words the word 10? That would be a good auditory visual exercise. Our next is auditory sequential memory. Auditory sequential memory is the ability for the child to reproduce from memory the certain sequence of auditory stimuli. Nothing else but simply saying, can he repeat what you said in the right sequence? Now, his sequential memory is important because spelling is all about having the right letters in the right places. This is an important skill the child must internalize. So, let us see some of the games that can be played. We do games, we do activities in normal day-to-day life. For instance, the names of the days of the week, months of the year. We can also play games with songs. For instance, I am sure all of you will know the song Old MacDonald Had a Farm. It is a very nice song which has a sequence of words, names of animals which something the child can relate to and the sound it makes, and it comes in a sequence. Shall we see how it works? Let me give you the song. Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O, and on this farm he had a cow, E-I-E-I-O, with a moo-moo here and a moo-moo there, here a moo, there a moo, everywhere a moo-moo. Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O, and on this farm he had a duck, E-I-E-I-O, with a quack quack here, a quack quack there, here a quack, there a quack, everywhere a quack quack, moo moo here, moo moo there, here a moo, there a moo, everywhere a moo moo. Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O. This way, you can add any number of animals with any number of sounds, but the child has to repeat when he comes back all the animals and all the sounds that he has heard. A lovely, lovely game for auditory sequential memory. Many of us have heard the Christmas carol, the 12th day of Christmas. That too has come in sequence. Beautiful games, Chinese whispers, again what we played earlier, we can play for this. Lovely games to help with the auditory sequential memory. Next on our list, and I think it is the final one, the auditory closure. The auditory closure is the ability to fill in the missing parts which have been presented to him orally and come up with the complete whole. Children with difficulty in this area will have difficulty following instructions and even following conversations if there are a lot of disturbances either by a lack of volume or too much of sound. Games that we can play for this is when we repeat an incomplete sentence that we have said to the child. For example, the teacher says, "This is a very nice," and he points to an object that is lying on top of his notebook. The child must be able to repeat the whole sentence and completes it by saying, "This is a very nice pen." This child completes a sentence that says, "The pen is on the dash," and the child is able to complete it saying, "The pen is on the book." Closure exercises are nothing but filling in the missing gaps. Auditory closure, whether he can hear it and repeat it verbally or maybe even in writing, but the instruction and the stimuli is given to him auditorily. Good exercise for the child to practice. Whenever we are giving the child dictation, we can give him with a missing letter at the end or at the beginning, and the child will have to use his knowledge to fill up that missing letter, or if we are giving a sentence, the missing word. With this, we have come to the end of the auditory mode of learning spelling. Our next is the visual mode. Pretty much the same sub-modalities, but with fine difference. The first in our list is the visual reception. The ability to receive inputs that have been presented to him visually. Now, the child must be able to decode or must be able to perceive and have the visual processing to interpret what has been shown to him. Nothing here is auditory, everything is all visual. So, games that you can play with this: show and tell. The child is shown an object and he is talking about that object that he sees. A very good exercise, especially in the earlier classes when you are trying to introduce concepts of color, taste, texture. In the pre-primary classes, when you are introducing these concepts of auditory reception also, the child's show and tell activity is a very nice activity that he can play. We can also give him a variety of objects in different shapes, and you have the child to classify or to segregate them in the same shape, same size and the same colors. We can display pictures with missing parts and the child points out the missing parts and draws it. He can match pictures with words. These are skills that needs to be taught and given to the child right from the very early stages of learning. If these modalities and if these skills are in place, the child will find learning very easy in the later stages. Next in our line is visual motor association. The ability to interpret the symbols that he has seen either through his fine motor or through his gross motors. We have already seen that gross motor is the ability to use the larger muscles and the fine motor is the ability to use the fine motor muscles in your fingers or for your writing. Some of the games that we can play for visual motor association is to pick out pictures that belong to the same category or the opposite category. We can sort in way of size, color and shapes. We can arrange a sentence to make a story. Another very nice game for fine motor activity is playing the game rock, paper, scissors, something that every child plays nowadays. For the gross motor activity, draw clouds on the floor and have words which are opposite to each other and make the child jump to opposite word that you are saying. For instance, if you have said the word hot, he needs to go and jump on the word cold. Again, the body movement, the gross motor movement will help to internalize the concept. Our next is your visual closure. Visual closure, like the auditory closure, is the ability to see the missing part, to see what is missing and what has to be added to make the picture complete. We can start all closure exercises with first pictures or shapes. Draw a triangle with one line missing. Draw a picture of a cat with his ears missing. We have often played games like pin the tail on the donkey. These are all good closure exercises. Connecting dot to dot in a book to form letters is a very good activity for the fine motor and for the closure exercise. You can find the hidden object in a picture. How many of us even today look for how the 6 differences in a picture, a very nice activity for visual closure. Make pictures of people using geometric shapes, finding shapes in clouds as we travel, a good exercise for the visual closure. Let him interpret the shape of the cloud to something that he sees. Can he fill in that missing and say this looks like a shape of an elephant or a shape of a bird? Our next is the visual sequential ability. The visual sequential ability is the ability to reproduce sequences of non-meaningful designs, pictures, letters or words from memory. This ability is very, very important in spelling. The child will have difficulty in reproducing the series of numbers, the correct sequence of letters from memory, and playing games will help to enhance the skill. Games that we can play for visual sequential memory are puzzles. Puzzles require a lot of attention, a lot of focus and a lot of sequential abilities. Cut apart a cartoon and ask the child to put it back in the original order. Ascending and descending order in mathematics is another very important game that can be played for the child. He is not only internalizing the numbers in the sequence, the larger and the smaller, the one that comes before, the one comes after, but he is also internalizing the visual sequential memory. Putting words in alphabetical order is an important skill that he can start playing with right from the very beginning. This will stand him good even when he grows older and later stages of his life. So, visual sequential games are important games and it is an important skill that needs to be taught to the child. Visual discrimination is our final point in the visual mode. The ability to see the finer differences in similar looking letters or words. Children with this difficulty will have most probably reversals and inversions in his writing. B and D is one visual difficulty that many children have been identified to be dyslexic having it. So, what are the games that we can play for this? Matching colors, shapes, sizes, sorting buttons in a tray full of various shapes of buttons and colors of buttons. Ask the child to sort. He should be able to find the difference in very minutely different buttons and shapes. Lay out 3 playing cards and tell the child to pick out which 2 are alike and why. The child has to see the difference between what is alike and why is it alike, and maybe he can also be told to tell what is different and why is it different. The visual discrimination is an important skill. In fact, all the skills that I have mentioned so far are very important skills that the child has to internalize in order to be able to spell well. This pre-skill is an important area which you can teach the child using lot of colors, lot of multisensory activities and by giving him practice, because practice makes perfect. With this we come to the end of this segment. Our next segment will be the various competencies that the child must have in order to be able to become a good speller. Thank you.